when I wrote the article about Time GPT, I actually said, I'm not worried about AI replacing me because there's a lot of people that are going to fill that free time with unproductive time, and I'm still going to be needed.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Navigating Life with the Human Compass. On my show today, Mr. David Buck, or Dave Buck as he's familiarly known as. He is actually joining me from the United States. He's a business owner and chief time strategist at Kairos Time Management Solutions and the Infinity Lifestyle Design. And on this show, he joins me and we talk about various thoughts on a variety of topics, from work-life balance to coping with procrastination. And he was kind enough to share some practical tips on time management in general, and of course on diary management from a corporate lifestyle standpoint. He has introduced this unique concept of Time GPT. So let's listen in to Dave Buck and to his response to some of my questions.
So generally, hard skills are usually measurable, they're process-based, there's a functionality to it, and so it's easy to either train someone on that or measure it. Soft skills, obviously more are personal, they're internal, and they're things that we are responsible, I feel, to work on more on the soft skills. You can be trained and coached on it, but it's your motivation that drives that. And then when you apply those concepts to the idea of time management hard skills are again tied to processes. You can think of things like the Eisenhower matrix, which is how you set your tasks up, the Pomodoro technique, where you do 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of a break. So there's structure around that. Those are the hard skills. You can learn those and you can apply those. And then there's the soft skills of time management. And those are things, again, you're going to have to work on yourself. You can be held accountable for communication, but it's really something you've got to work on. So communication, organization, adaptability, and this general understanding of how to use your time, which is what I would consider time management soft skills. So most of my clients, the reason why they come to me is they want to learn about how to be more personally productive. And I actually take them through, I said, show me your calendar today. Mm-hmm. And normally when I see their calendar, it's populated with a series of meetings that usually they don't initiate. So I find many people, even corporate executives, are very reactive when it comes to their planning of their calendar and how they use their time from their calendar. And I want people to be proactive. So I recommend that everyone, and some people think I'm crazy when they first start out with, is you plan every hour of your calendar 2 weeks out, a rolling 2 weeks out. Now I use the term wet cement for that term because wet cement, it's poured in a form, it has structure, but it can still be changed and adjusted. And so I ask everybody to adopt a wet cement strategy. So you put structure around it, knowing you're going to have to change, particularly if you're a leader. If you get into a leadership role, good leaders adapt their schedule based upon the needs of their team. Salespeople do it in the basis of their clients. So you set a structure around it, but then you plan out flexibility. So if you have to change it, you do it. And then going back to your point about working on a calendar during the day, I encourage everybody at the end of the day, you evaluate what you did and you check tomorrow to make sure that tomorrow's lined up. And then first thing in the morning, you double check today now, line it up, and at the end of the day, evaluate it again and go through that. So I first of all suggest that obviously if you have a very full calendar and you're finding that pressure coming on there, is that you have to identify for you what are the priorities that you have to do? Because not everything's a priority. So you first of all identify, I've got a 8-hour shift and 7 hours of them are full of meetings. You have to say, what are the most important meetings that I need to be at? Then you then lay out what's the goals of those meetings. And it's okay, I think, regardless of what your culture is, if you frame it and say, hey, I see I've got invited to this meeting. Why do you need me there? What's the goal? How am I going to contribute to make this meeting better? And I think you find a lot of times people, I have been so guilty of this, I just invite the largest group possible because I'm like, I'm going to get a bunch of people in the room and someone's going to help me solve my problem.
Yeah.
Whereas if people came in and said, Dave, why are you inviting me? I could challenge back. So really look at each one of those meetings and say, how am I going to contribute? And if you're like, I don't know how, then go back to the meeting organizer, respectfully say, I want to be able to contribute. I just don't know how. The other aspect is sometimes you can give them their answer before you even go in the meeting. So if someone's good at meeting organization and they tell you, here's the goal of the meeting, this is what we're going to accomplish, you might be able to look at that and say, I'm going to send them a 2-paragraph email and we're done. And sometimes that gets accepted really well because you have now freed up everybody from having to attend a meeting. So to me, it's all about being proactive. It's about being respectful, and it's about asking as many questions as you can about the nature of that meeting to get clarity before you attend, so you're not having to ask it while you're in it. That's a great question. I encourage leaders, when I work with them from a time management standpoint, is to look at your team's time as important as yours. Because if you have expectations from your team, which leaders all do, that they should then understand that their team has to devote time to what's important to the team goals. And so I encourage leaders to be able to have their associates or team member challenge them. So if a meeting gets put on the calendar, everyone needs to ask why. Why are we meeting? What's the goal of that meeting? And meeting management to me is something that it's almost a hard and a soft skill, because you have to learn the nuances of it. So there is a little bit of political savvy that you need to understand in the dynamics of an office, like a subordinate going to a boss and saying, man, I'm not showing up for your meeting. It's probably not the best way to do it, but to come up and say, wow, you scheduled this meeting. I have 3 things that you need me to do today.
Yeah.
Can we look at either rescheduling that meeting or help me reprioritize the things you've asked me to do because you want my time in this meeting? So it is a give and take process where obviously the subordinate respects what the leader has to do, but the leader also respects the subordinate so that you collaborate more instead of dictating. The old proverb, time abhors a vacuum, or nature abhors a vacuum. Time also abhors a vacuum. So yes, as AI makes our lives more efficient, if you don't make use of the time that you save from that, you're not going to improve anything. As a matter of fact, when I wrote the article about Time GPT, I actually said, I'm not worried about AI replacing me, because there's a lot of people that are going to fill that free time with unproductive time, and I'm still going to be needed. So I feel, Chat GPT is Chat Generative Pre-Training Transformer. That's what the acronym stands for. Well, Time GPT is Time General Preparation Training. So the idea is Time General is that it's really no tool or system that you're going to use is going to be effective unless you're actively a participant in it. I deal with people who have the most amazing time tracking tools and they don't use them, and that's why they come to me, because they're not invested in that. So Time General to me is whatever tools you use, And I feel your calendar is the single most effective time management tool. If we're on an email server, basically we all have it. So if you invest time in that, you'll get the general aspects of time general down. Then the second area of time preparation is this idea of optimization versus time management. I feel time management, many people look at it as a reactive activity. A boss puts a meeting on my calendar, then I got to figure out. Yeah. Whereas time optimization to me is where you're proactive. You've laid out your calendar for the day, so when that meeting pops in, you have a story to tell your boss or the meeting organizer that says, I had this time planned for these 3 activities. How can we negotiate something different? So time preparation is critical. And then finally, time training is that you invest in yourself to constantly self-improve, personal development that says, I'm going to do and intentionally look at things that help me be more productive. That time training is what I feel gives the average person a leg up on the competition in promotability and moving forward. I always found those that do a personal development element in it, time specific or not, are usually the ones when I find out that's why they're leading, is because they did that on their own, besides the person who just comes in and says what's expected of them.
Okay.
So of 20 measurements that I do, that I work with my clients on, procrastination is number 2. Distractions is number 1 for people. So procrastination is a huge issue for people as they try to manage their time. You touched on a lot of good points that drive us into a procrastination mindset. So some of the most common ones are, it's a really too broad of a goal. It's a task that's really a project. I use a personal aspect. Let's say I wanted to paint my room here. I wanted to repaint the room, put some color in here. Well, if I put that just as something to do, as a task, then what happens is I'm more apt to procrastinate, because there are a bunch of steps I need to do. I need to pick the color, I need to get the supplies, I need to allocate the time. So there's a variety of steps for me to say, I've painted my room. So that's where I tell people is, when I look at it, they're procrastinating, I said, it's because you've got a project in front of you and not a task. So break those down into manageable steps, and then you find you won't disappoint yourself if you only get 1 or 2 tasks done to that project, because you've made progress. And so that's a big challenge. And then typically in an environment of an office, a general sense of procrastination is usually when a leader gives unclear expectations and simply says, we need to have this report done. And then the team doesn't say, well, how big's the report? What's in the report? When do you want the report? So it sits out there and everybody languishes. Then typically what happens, a leader gets angry because their time frame that they had in their head comes up and they're like, we don't have this done. What's everybody doing? So it's usually too sophisticated, too detailed of a task, and there's just not enough information. As you are, and it's asking questions of others and yourself to finally get down to the nitty gritty. Again, if it's 10 or 15 tasks that you have to do, that also helps you manage expectations of getting it done. Because so many times people procrastinate because they do get stressed because they say, well, I'll get this done next week. Mm-hmm. You don't have the time to get it done next week, whereas you could probably get half the tasks associated with that thing you're procrastinating on done in that week's time. So really, yes, asking a lot of specific questions until you're satisfied, either yourself or of your leader or boss, or of your subordinate too. If your subordinate's procrastinating, get them in there and ask a ton of questions, and I think you'll unpack pretty quickly what's causing them to delay.
True, that's great.
I am trying to weave people away from the concept of work-life balance to more work-life flexibility. The reason why balance to me is you want to seek this level. I'm sorry, it's almost like water can either be vapor, liquid, or solid. It can't be all at the same time. You can't find that balance for a sustainable period of time. So to me, it's about finding that flexibility. Where there are periods you're going to have to invest in work for deep periods, up early in the morning, you work, you come home, you work at night. I think any of us who's any length of a career, who's cared about our career, we've lived that. The idea is you don't want that to be your full state all the time. So some of the things that I do, because I actually had to, as little as 4 years ago, I was commuting an hour and 5 minutes one way to work. So what I would do in the situations of the commute, in the morning, I might have a series of casual phone calls to check up on team members while I'm driving into work. Not anything sustainable, because you got to pay attention to the drive. But I would pick low-level activities that I could communicate with people on the way in, so that by the time I got into work, I probably could have checked off a small activity. So I would look at lower level items, whether it's quick communications. Maybe that time you could call your boss and say, you scheduled a meeting for me at 3 o'clock. I'm on my way into the office. Can we talk about that a little bit differently when we're in there? So little lower activities. I always use the time on the way home for personal development and learning. I listen to a book on tape, a podcast, or something for me to unwind a little bit before I walked in the door. Also, what's important, if you have to work outside of normal hours, structure that. Don't just keep the structure during the day. What do you want to accomplish if you have to work a couple extra hours at night? You need to define that, give yourself goals, check off those tasks. So it's just not, I'm going to recover from everything I didn't get done today, because then you're not finding a way to go forward. And then I just think it's important. Personal care to me is an important part of time management. It is something that you need to try to at least get 7 hours of sleep at night. If not, work your way up to it. Working that extra hour, if I just put in another hour, may or may not be beneficial. And then take formal breaks during the day. Get away from your screen, just go for a quick walk, do something different to re-trigger your mind and to get going, and then do some type of physical activity, something that gets your heart rate up. If you can do 30 minutes 3 times a week to start out with, that's a great small step to take for you to then, you'll find your energy levels up, your cognitive abilities are stronger, and you're generally more productive.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dave, for all these tips. And I think we spoke on a gamut of issues, from procrastination to managing time, your desk, your calendars, and more importantly, your concept of time GPT. Dave Buck, business owner and chief time strategist at the Infinity Lifestyle Design. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.